later on, it's ctstate.edu/webinars. You can see all the past recordings of our presentations. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Sarah White, the Director of Admissions Operations for CT State.
Thank you, Alexa. So I'm going to go ahead and start by sharing my screen, and we have a short PowerPoint presentation, and I would like my co-presenters to introduce themselves. So let me just share my screen first. There we go. So today, as a team, Karissa, Vinny, and I will be going through CT State One College application overview. And if I could give my good colleague Vinny the opportunity to introduce himself and speak to how he supports this particular project. We're going to be like a seance. Vinny, are you there?
I am there. Try to hit mute. My name is Vincent Kedzior. I'm the Assistant Director of Technical Operations and Processing Specialist. I help with the technical operations of CRM Recruit, which is the application system that we use for CT State, along with fixing the integration issues that do occur and oversee the processing specialist.
Thank you, Vinny. Karissa, if you could please take the baton.
I'm Karissa Smith. I come from Northwestern. I'm the Associate Director of Admissions, Operations, and Communications. So essentially, I am the one organizing all of the communications that are sent from CRM to students. So that involves phone calls, text messages, and emails. And so that is in our CT State application as well as our current 12C application system for CRM Recruit.
Thanks, Karissa. So throughout the presentation, Karissa is going to be paying attention to what's coming into the chat, and then she'll stop me if the question is pertinent to this point, or may hold off until I get further in the presentation, because who knows, maybe I'll be anticipating the types of questions that you have. I do want to start by giving a little bit of a historical perspective for folks who aren't familiar with CRM Recruit, which is what the application is that we are using for, I should say, the technical piece that we're using for admissions applications. So basically, CRM Recruit first came together as a 12 college piece where we had one application, but they were kind of like almost like processing on the 12 pieces of banner that were in place currently. So your 12 colleges, we would have one application, students would pick their college location, pick their academic program, all worked very independently, but it gave us through that, that first experience a good way to let us know how we should move forward for this CT State merger. So we took basically everything we learned since we launched in May 2020, which was extraordinarily helpful during the pandemic, because it was the first way for students to securely upload their documents and items and basically go through the whole process online versus having to come into the college, relying on items to be solely mailed to us. So there really was something kind of different going on with us being able to do everything online. So we took the knowledge that we learned over basically a year and a half at this point, and in January 2021, a steering committee that was built of folks from all the campuses, some people who are involved in the first iteration of CRM Recruit, to kind of look at what do we need to fold into this one college application. And a lot of it was very similar. We basically subbed out college for campus location. We're able to do some filtering in different ways for students to select their particular academic program. But with that in mind, the actual pieces that you may be interested in knowing are pretty, I would say, elementary. We want to start. So CRM Recruit is that product that we're using. And what is it really? CRM is a customer relationship manager. So what that means on our end is it allows us to build an application and all those supporting pieces. such as the supplemental items to complete an application. So we know for our students pursuing a degree program, they're going to need to provide us with proof of high school completion, immunizations, and this gives us a portal, so to say, for them to upload those items in there to complete the application. And they would start by creating an account, filling in that application, uploading documents. All that information would go right over to Banner. So those key pieces that go into Spaden, into SATMs, Sagashtin, those are all moved over into Banner. And then the real benefit to this particular product or CRM in general is that any of the data points that we can collect, so any field that's on an application, we can do queries to say, okay, who's our target audience for a particular communication? Do we need to do outreach to them? And we can pull that information very easily and then create sort of what we call a member list to send those particular potential students communications to ensure that they have the information they need to make it sort of to the next stage in this application process. So everything we do, we look at is moving a student through the admissions funnel from inquiry until enrollment. And we'll speak to that a little bit more in a moment. And there we go. Okay, so in terms of application processing and evaluation, we will be changing up a little bit on how we are currently processing. We still will be doing the same thing where we check supplemental items, but where we were able to expand out with this particular application is now we can include our selective admission programs. So if you happen to be from a campus or work with a program that had selective admission in the past, they did their own application. And that's not super helpful in terms of our recruitment side of the house because we can't necessarily do the same type of tracking and moving students through the funnel. In addition to that, you may not always have had the type of support on the admission side of the house for those particular programs to have the applications reviewed and decisioned. So what we have created as part of CT State is a relationship between our selective admissions areas and both the admission side and working with program coordinators so that we are collecting those supplemental items that would make them eligible for admission. We're working with those programs to take all the pieces that go into how they select those students so that we can provide them with just basically the information, here are your eligible students. In addition to that, our international folks would be working with international students, and we are working very closely with transcript credit evaluators to ensure that sort of all parts and pieces are working together so that we can move students through in a timely manner. So with that being said, our general admission applicants, which would be the non-selective folks, non-international folks, we are looking to move them through this process once they have their completed application within 2 business days. We want to be able to turn them around so that they can take their next steps towards enrollment. Now, the selective admissions, so these would be nursing and health careers, they are going to be processed according to common timelines that will support student decision-making and academic program enrollment goals. So what does that really mean? Basically, it means if we have all these programs who want to enter in fall 2023, their deadline for applying would be February 1, 2023. We can then take all of those folks who may have similar supplemental items or prerequisites for admission, and we could cast the net wider. So in the past, we've always known that nursing has had a very strong wait list, whereas there's twice as many students on the wait list as they have spaces. And we can take that applicant pool and prior to February 1, try to help them find another home just in case. So we can take care of a communication plan to do outreach and say, hey, you look like you've taken all the courses that you'd need for nursing. These other 4, 5 programs would require the same things. They include the same types of values and skill sets that you would find in nursing. You may be interested in also applying for those programs. So we are looking at sort of expanding out in recruitment to give these students some other opportunities within the system that will still get them to that same kind of career goal. So we're looking at this as really an opportunity for students to find a home in a similar career if they're not able to get into that one that they were thinking was their first choice. So that really helps us with program enrollment goals and some of these programs that may not have had a full class because students may not necessarily have known that these were available options. And some of that limitation is really looking at particular college campuses being on their own versus one college of CT State, where now we can really share across to ensure that folks are filling those seats with really viable, eligible applicants. And then the last piece that I kind of want to mention here for processing and evaluation is that on the worker side, on our side, we have some fantastic dashboards that we can build and customize so that actions for moving students through the process or seeing information as to what's out there are available in our dashboards. So this is one way that we're working with our college users to ensure that it is as easy and simple as it possibly can be to find information and to take those actions. So the other piece that I would say is half of what we do is communications to prospective students. And, you know, as much as, and I didn't say this and I should say this, Vinny's really the key component on those dashboards, assisting our users when they have issues or difficulties. We want to respond to them immediately. So with the communication plans, Chris is our resident expert on making sure we have these plans built that work with students through these particular stages. The point of inquiry, where they say they have interest. If a student has started an application, but let's say 10 days later, they haven't finished it. Well, through that particular communication plan, they're going to get, let's say, a phone call after 4 days or after 8 days. I don't have it committed to memory, of course. And then they'll also get emails. We do text messaging and we do set up phone calls so that recruiters or our application processors would be reaching out to students to make sure that whatever point of this funnel they're in, they have what they need to take the next steps. So those other components are application submitted missing items, where we want them to turn in the items that they need so we can review them. And then application complete, ready for review is really something that we are utilizing more so with international and selective folks, because their application may become complete, but they won't necessarily get a decision within 2 days because we're looking at these populations a little bit differently. Application decisions, we would then communicate out to students. I mean, up till this point, we've really only been admitting students because we've been looking at this general population. But as we looked at selective folks, we may have wait list, ineligible, conditional admits, etc. And then finally, yield. Yield is the biggest plan in terms of the number of touch points we have with students, because we want to get them to register for classes. And this is really where we look at the relationships that we have with other folks on the campus to ensure that we're partnering where we can. Should advising be involved? What about the other services on campus? We want to make sure that through this sort of admit not registered, we are getting things answered for students so we can get them to register for classes. And then once they register, that's where our relationship with them ends, and it's kind of turned over to the folks on campus to work with the students. Karissa, did you want to add anything?
I think you covered it. The only one that's not really a funnel stage itself is when students are coming to events. So when they register for events, they end up actually becoming an inquiry if they aren't already in a separate stage, and we're obviously prompting them to apply and join us. It's a really delicate balance of trying not to oversaturate them, but trying to make strategic communications and outreach based off of actions that they're taking by either, you know, submitting an application or maybe starting one and leaving it. So
Thank you. So at this point, we're going to kind of flip over to a demo. and wanted to sort of share, because this slide deck will be part of the recording, what the actual link that we're using. So we're going to go into the student-facing portal, and in this student-facing portal, that is where students would create their account and take care of the items on their side. If anybody wanted to go in and submit a test application, this is the particular link you would go to. So let me switch gears for a moment. Okay, so I do very sincerely apologize. There's usually the word test in here. Hopefully by the end of today, you'll see the word test, because I would look at this immediately and say, oh my goodness, we're in production. But you'll see the URL still says test here. So this is where we would send our students for CT State, and this would be for anybody who's applying for fall 2023 and beyond. As I said, we are currently using this the same product in the 12 college environment, but the URL is different. Students would be using that one if they are applying for winter 22, spring 23, or summer 23. And at that point in time, that will be shut down and we will only be using this particular site. So they can sign in here if they already have an account. That account is unique. We ask them to create it once. If we see that they have been naughty and they tried to work around and do it 2 accounts, we do merge them and let them know, hey, you can only have 1 account. And the real important reason is that all of this integrates into Banner. And so that Banner ID will get created, and we don't want to have duplicate IDs out there. So when we notice that there's a duplicate, we merge accounts, we communicate with them on which particular login to be using. And there's methods in here for them, of course, to get their password reset. And so I'm just going to go ahead and create a new account. And up here in the header, before I continue, I just want to point out that Karissa mentioned events, and the events would be searchable for students who have an account, but we also do post out event registration. So when we had Enroll in a Day this past weekend, we can create the event right in CRM Recruit and come up with a URL that takes students right to the registration. So they wouldn't have to navigate or already be a student or have an account created. They can do this what we call anonymously. And so we would then be able to communicate out with folks who create sort of an opportunity is what we call it. They create an opportunity without being linked yet to anything within the system. So we do have that option to work 2 ways. So when they create their account, we always have in mind what information is going to be important to linking up for financial aid, for matching records, so we don't create duplicates. And so that's really why we go in with, what is your legal first name? So we're going to say Ruby Red Grapefruit is our test student, and we instruct them, please, 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 please use a personal email. If you use a college, university, or high school email, there's pretty much constantly problems, such as high schools have fantastic firewalls, and then we can't send them emails, and then they don't learn what they need to learn about our programs in their application. So that is one thing. Or maybe they lose their email when they leave the institution, and that's not good for us in continuing our relationship with them. So after we do that, we do ask them for a preferred number. They have 3 choices. If they do select mobile phone, we ask them also to enter a home phone. So for any faculty who may be part of today's WebEx, you know that that information is what gets populated on the course roster. If there's a reason that you need to contact them, it will only show up if that home phone is populated in Banner. So with that in mind, we make it required in there, and we tell them, hey, this is why we need it. And if they enter the same number, that's no big deal to us. So for text messaging, they do have to opt in to text messaging. And we do have particular guidelines, like Karissa mentioned, oversaturation. We don't want to keep texting them because then they will unsubscribe. But we also have limitations of 4 text messages a month per application. So if students have submitted, let's say, a nursing application and then another allied health application, they might get text messages that pertain to both of those. And a huge piece of matching student records would be their birth date. Now, the nice thing about what seems to be a lengthy create account page is that all this data does get populated into their application. So they don't have to enter this information a second time because it will be available once they move forward from this particular page. And we do ask them if they're seeking an F1 visa. And this is one of those pieces where it's a field, we can extract information on it. And this would be the first sign, if they say yes, for the international team to do some of their outreach for these students to ensure that their questions and their needs are being addressed. So down here we have our area of interest, and this serves really 2 needs. One, for our guided pathways folks out there, it splits folks up into particular areas of study. But the second piece is if I select one, it whittles down the academic program list. Nobody wants to look at 300 academic programs. So if I was to select nursing and health careers, it would take me into only those programs that would be available. Please keep in mind that some of the programs are cross-listed. So if you're saying, well, this could be in business or this could also be in math, it might be in both those locations. This is really on this end a filtering piece. So it doesn't necessarily feed into anything in particular in Banner or which guided pathways advisor they'd be going to. This is really a filtering tool on this side. So I am actually going to move away from nursing and health careers, and let's pick science and math. And let's go ahead and pick biotechnology. Ruby Red is feeling she wants to pursue that. Okay, so students don't necessarily know that fall starts in August. We wanted to outline when the particular time period would be for courses. So if they have to pick, only the available application term will show up. And then campus location would be the campuses it's available at. Now I do have a little bit of a side note here. We will be receiving particular campus locations that are related to the program where they would take their core academic requirements for that program of study. So that portion is not complete. We will do follow-up with students who selected a campus location where that may not be the case for the program. But in terms of our selective programs, and there's a few others, it is filtered in that particular way. So keep in mind that as a work in progress, we are getting that piece in place shortly. And when I say shortly, within the next few weeks. So if I was actually to switch back to nursing and health careers, and I picked dental hygiene, whoa, it tells me what I need to be eligible, because we know that for a program like dental hygiene, it is selective and you do have courses you would need and items you would need to submit to be eligible. And we would then ask them, have you or will you have completed the prerequisites for that program? So if a student says no here, we make a recommendation that they go back and change it to general studies. However, we will know that they answered this question. So our selective admission specialists are going to reach out to the student and say, hey, we saw you were interested in dental hygiene. Let's get you on track to apply. So this is really a fantastic tool to get students in the pipeline and get them into these correct courses so that they would be eligible to apply down the line. So I am going to change this back simply because I'm going to follow instructions. I said no, so I'm going to change this to general studies. And then campus location, I can select any campus. If I had gone down earlier, I apologize, I would have only had said Tunxus. So let's keep Tunxus. And then we ask the student, what kind of student are you? And we try to give them more information on what they should be considering for themselves. So they will select the one that is correct for them. So I will select new, and then I'm going to create my password. And create account. There is reCAPTCHA in our production environment. It's not enabled in test because we don't really need it here, but it is something that we do put out there for production. And you can see it's thinking. It will get us there. Karissa, were there any questions at this point that?
There was a comment that we really liked the selective admissions feature. And then somebody has asked if this will be shared out the PowerPoint that you had put together, if that could be shared out.
Absolutely. Be happy to. Okay, so the application itself is 5 simple tabs, and tabs 1 and 2 here, personal and academic plans, are pretty much all filled in because of all the info we just put out there. But we're still going to review because there's a few that we do need to fill in. So we do ask students if they have a former last name that may be one that we already have, so we can do some matching. And if their name has changed since last time, we may ask them for some documentation to update the existing record. We also ask for preferred first name, and we do let them know that's what will appear on course rosters and when your college email address is generated. So yeah, I'd like to be called Ruby, not Ruby Red. And then the other contact information still remains, but when we get down to some of our person data, we do have to insert gender. So this is the gender marker that appears on official government documents that denotes male or female. We do not have the ability at the time to put gender identity in here, but that is something that we've asked about and we have wanted to pursue, but at this particular time, it is not an option. So we are just going to work from this particular field at the moment, and we have to fill that in. And then we have the lovely question about residency. So this is one of the areas that, depending on how a student answers it, it might generate a new supplemental item for the student. So if I had said, no, I have not lived in Connecticut for a year, the next piece is, well, could you prove that you should still be, that you're a Connecticut resident? And then it gives opportunity for student to do that through providing other information. So I've lived in Connecticut for at least a year and I don't have a different mailing address. So I will save and continue. And then academic plans, just like what we saw before, it walks us through the area of study, the academic program, the campus location, our start term, our student type. And then we have some questions that are built in that are institutional research driven. What is your educational goal? You'll notice there's no asterisk. So this would be information that feeds into Banner, but it's really data collection purposes. So if I say I want to get my associate degree. Now, Pledge to Advance Connecticut, the PACT question, is really to record interest. This does not feed into Banner in any way to say, if a student says no, then that means they're not eligible. This is to gauge interest and at least to put out there information about PACT in general. Now, this only appears if they say they're new first-time students. If you say you're a readmit, it is not a question on the application. So dynamic logic is at play here. And then if I save and continue, it takes me to demographics.
Sarah, can we talk about academic programs just for a
Absolutely.
second? So we have a question that is, how will program selection by applicants be handled if it's not normally offered at the campus of their choice. So I think that's referring back to what you were talking about, the filtering that will be happening.
Sure. So I think to back up a little bit, when you were looking at, and I'm just going to go back to the academic plan tab here. So when you were filtering through, if you select an academic program and then in their campus location, you don't see the campus that would be most convenient to you, one of the pieces of information that we will populate in here once we do have this information updated is that you can take your general education courses, and it will be wordsmithed in a much better way. You can take your general education courses at any of the 12 campuses, but those particular requirements for that academic program may only be completed at the locations that are listed here. So at that point in time, students would have to decide, do I want to travel if it's not convenient to where I live? Which in the case of some of the programs, that is a yes, because they want to get that particular degree. But I would say that this is best handled sometimes with a conversation, with looking maybe at what's available on the catalog side. I think that our admission recruiters will be sort of prepped and ready to answer some of these questions and kind of like, well, what's the best alternative if that distance really is, it's not a possibility for you travel wise, but we would like to kind of give as much information up front as possible so that the expectation of what the student has is something that we can deliver on. I don't know if there was any other, if I missed anything, or if either of you have sort of any additional input on that.
No, I think that sounds great. Definitely a conversation to help students pick the best program for them location-wise, as well as based off of their goals. There is another question unrelated to this.
Yes.
Kind of a general question as to who organizes Enroll in a Day. So I know we were talking about that events can be listed in CRM Recruit, but Enroll in a Day is kind of a special one.
So I don't know if I can really answer who organizes Enroll in a Day. I know that for our part, we come to the table to provide what we can to ensure that the program has information in Recruit so we can collect registration data. Because one of the nicest tools about this is if you register for an event and we mark that you attended, we can then collect all the metrics if you apply, if you enroll. It's a really nice system for that with events, but the actual Enroll in a Day, I don't know necessarily if we can talk to that through this webinar at the moment. So but that's a great question. We'll certainly write it down and bring it back for other folks in our team. So I'm going to flip to demographics, which we have sort of different information in here is where we kind of pull info to assist with particular populations of students. So we want to let students know we fully support educational advancement for undocumented students. We want to do outreach to our international students. And then we will basically pull information from how it's answered here. So the first question is citizenship status. If a student says they're a US citizen, we have to do our due diligence to collect that social security number. Meaning we tell them, why do we want it? And if you don't provide it, this is what will happen. So all students who do not provide us with a social security number will get what's called a social security election form in their supplemental item list to be completed. Within that, they have the full option to say, I do not wish to provide it. So they can do that. But by providing it to us, it really gives them better matching to former records, the FAFSA, of course. And if they're using the 1098T for the tax benefit, this again is our due diligence to request that information. Now, if they say they're not a US citizen, of course it skips over that. But we ask about primary citizenship if they're in the US. If they say yes, we say, hey, how long have you been here? But this piece is key. I am an international student that. So they would select an option. And if a student basically asks anything with the F1 student visa, our international folks are doing a fantastic job with their outreach and connecting with them. We also ask about first language, and you'll notice that this is not a required field. But one of the reasons that we are putting this in here is, one, we'd like to use this data for future state in developing publications and communications in other languages that are prevalent amongst our applicants. We feel as that would be a really useful tool. But we're also working with the ESL placement folks to do a supplemental form that goes with the application if they answer that their first language is anything other than English, and they say that they are a US citizen. So there's certain information we would build a query off of and then send them a supplemental item so that for placement purposes, our folks in the ESL program can assist these students. And then moving forward, we do ask all of the same information we've always gathered about ethnic information, military status. We may have a supplemental item requested of a student if they live out of state but answer one of these questions in the affirmative, where if we collect that data, we can then offer them in-state tuition as part of their military benefits. So I will save and continue. And then we get to academic history. So we need to collect information on their high school. Every single school in Connecticut, Mass, New York, and Rhode Island are in this database. And this is, we met with school counselors last week, and this was my plea. Please tell your students, please, please, please tell them this one thing. Scroll. So if you put the city, it will pull in all of the schools in the city or in the name of the school. So students might say, I can't find it. Well, if they don't scroll, they may not find it. But the more they type, the more they will see for that particular school. So if I was to start typing Prince, like AI Prince, it would pull it up, and there's only one to choose from. So I will select that. We ask information about whether or not they're going to graduate. And if they say yes, we ask information on attending. Now, this is the kind of information that goes over to Banner. So we want to have students put this in here so that information can be collected and utilized for those purposes as well. And then we do have a GPA converter. This is College Board provided. And this is, so students can do a self-reported GPA, which, as many of you know, this is used for course placement. So if they put their high school GPA is a 4.2, but the scale is a 7, and you click convert, that would be the GPA. Change to a 5. So that would be a 3.0. And then we ask them to enter it here. And as I said, this will go right into Banner as well. If there's additional high schools, they can add it. And we do also have an agreement with the Connecticut State Department of Ed on additional information that can assist a student when they enroll that would pertain to wraparound services, getting test scores automatically into our system. So in order for this to be put in place for the student, they have to answer yes and include their SACID. This is also a work in progress where we don't have all this information coming in as of yet, but we are working with them to get this taken care of. For our transfer friends, it's the same thing as high schools. If they say that they have attended a school outside of the Connecticut Community College system, because we won't need to collect transcripts if they took anything within the 12 colleges, they can click Add College. And that would do the same thing, as I said, with the high schools, where they can do the search and add the college in there. But I, for time purposes, am going to say didn't attend. And if they have been a prior student, we can ask them to give us their banner ID.
So we
And
did
then-
have a
Yes.
question about students taking classes at different community colleges. So somebody has asked, some of my students created their accounts this semester to take a single course at another college and then transfer their credits back to us. Where can the student indicate that their intended college is to complete their degree is theirs? So I don't know if you want to talk about the fact that they don't need to do multiple applications anymore.
Karissa, you could state it. Yay, one application, guys.
Happy.
Yes, we don't have any of that anymore. So they can go to your campus, take a class, that credit's coming in for CT State. So as we move forward to CT State for fall 2023, they won't have to fill in a new application. They are coming in under this umbrella as an continuing student. So those credits will automatically be pulled into, I don't even want to say the word transfer, but it will be pulled into what they have taken already.
Yes, and no continuing students have to submit a new CT State application. I know at Northwestern we get a lot of students who are taking classes in the fall and think they have to reapply in the spring. And I know that makes Vinny and his team not that happy to have a lot of continuing students filling out multiple applications. So if they are already at any of the 12 colleges, they do not need to reapply in this new application. This is only new students. We do have another question. Is there a way to change information on the application if a student puts in the wrong information after the student has submitted it?
Absolutely. And I would say we handle this all the time. So the way our structure is set up is after you complete an action, you're probably going to get an email from us. So when you submit the application, you'll get a application submitted acknowledgement. And within that, if they need to make changes, they can hit reply and it will go to the team that can then respond to that and update it, call the student, make whatever changes are necessary. So in terms of outreach and how to get in touch with our folks, everything we communicate with, we include contact because we want to ensure that students are not kind of left out with what do I do next. So we fully expect changes to be made. I do want to back up and say one thing about submitting a new application. If you are a currently enrolled student and you do want to pursue some of those selective admission areas, that would be the case where you do have to fill in a new application because the entrance criteria is a little different. You can't just continue and pick a new academic program for those nursing and allied health programs, which are about 23. Yes. So educational goals and backgrounds, this, it does mirror what's currently in 12 college banner as to institutional research fields that do feed into the banner itself. And then, let's see. So friends, here we are at the end of the line, self-attestation and signature, where we're asking applicants to say yes, that we can use their personal email address, that within the community college system, we are working together and sharing data, and that everything in that application is true. So they will self-attest here. Oh, let's be official about this. And submit the application. So, the question about changing information, oh, look at that. I didn't mean to do it, but this is a really good part of the demonstration, is that if you do select a field that's required, it will not allow you to submit the application without filling it in. So if you click right there, it takes you to that field. So I am not an international student, so I'll just keep that as US citizen. I'll go back to my self-attestation page and go ahead and submit. So while this is happening and the submission's happening behind the scenes, all of this data is getting pushed into our CRM Recruit system. And behind the scenes, all these things are being run that will generate, based on how the student answered questions, what items need to be completed for admission. But if I wanted to look at my application to see how I filled it in, I can click where that said view and it takes me to my completed application. So I can see all the pieces of information I had entered in there. So if I'm not sure what I put in there and I want to check and then contact the college and say, hey, this was incorrect, I can look and see what it is before I make that contact. Now, the other piece, and